Pete Elman, on Thursday afternoons.
So hello, everybody. You can see from the screen, I'm actually teaching 2 classes this session. One in Berkeley, which is a reprise of the first class I ever taught, early days of rock and roll. But the one I'm teaching here on Thursday afternoons is one of my favorite classes to teach. It's called a road trip of country music. And it's basically an up-close and personal look, and I mean that, personal look, at the golden age of American country music. And in this class, we're going to explore key movements that contributed to the explosive growth of country music and made it what it is now, and a big part of our culture. So what happens in each class, I know some of you have been in some of my classes, they're pretty different. It's kind of a cross between music history, music appreciation, live music, and a bunch of stories. That's my class. And sometimes I have guests. I will have at least one guest this session to come up and perform with me. So I talk about these periods, usually concentrating on the artists that were key during these periods. And I show some slides, and I pick out some audio from CDs and play the audio track. Sometimes I'll just play part of it. Sometimes I'll play the whole thing. I'll frequently put up the lyrics to these songs and talk about the lyrics. I'm a reformed English teacher, so I love lyrics. I also show archival videos, which I've gone through to try to find the coolest, most fun ones that might be a little bit off the beaten path. And then we have the live music component too. So what is my class about? Well, week 1 I call The Rise of Honky-Tonk Music, 1940 to 1960, up from bluegrass. We go all the way back to the early days of country, Jimmy Rogers, the Carter family. Then we spend most of the class on Hank Williams. And we go a little bit past Hank Williams and talk about Lefty Frizzell and the early days of Nashville. Week 2, I concentrate on what we call the Nashville sound, which is that golden era of late 50s to late 60s that featured some, great singers like Johnny Cash and Roger Miller and Jim Reeves and George Jones and all the classic country singers, and how Nashville really took a gigantic leap from being kind of a regional thing to a huge international art form and business. Now, week 3 is a little more specific and a lot of fun. I call it Let's Go to Lukenbach, Texas, where I talk about outlaw country, especially Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings and Townes Van Zandt, some of the people that spent a lot of time in Austin. I did live in Austin in the mid-'70s, which was when outlaw country was happening. So I have a lot of stories that are actually, things that I did and saw and people I knew. And that's a really interesting class because that's when country music started to veer away from that very kind of conservative establishment and get a little bit hipper and more long hair and a little bit different. Week 4, I come back here to California. I call that California Cotton Fields. And I talk about Buck Owens and Merle Haggard and some of the other great country artists that pretty much, laid it down in California. And also at the end of that class, I do like a special tribute to Marty Robbins, who, although he was not from California, I feel that he kind of belongs with that group because of the nature of his music. Week 5 is devoted to the women of country. I talk about the women sporadically because they're very important artists, but it's exclusively talking about those great women of country. We start with Kitty Wells, and we talk, of course, a lot about Patsy Cline and Tammy Wynette and Loretta Lynn and Dolly Parton and even more modern like Emmylou Harris, people like that. And the last week is pretty interesting. I call that the country song and the country record. And it's kind of an in-depth look at how they make the records and how they write the songs. And I talk about great songwriters and great songwriting teams over the last 70 years. And it really talks about how a great country song can make your day or break your heart. So I am now teaching 12 different classes on American popular music, and I think, in all honesty, this is one of my favorites, if not my favorite, to teach, because so many people kind of like country music, but they're not really sure, they don't know a lot about it. And I think if you have an opportunity to come and take my course, you'll walk away from this with a real appreciation for this great American art form. So I hope to see you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Pete, thank you very much.